One thing that I've noticed this generation, maybe more so than previous, is that people are really looking for games with a lot of content, games that can keep them busy for quite a while and really get the most bang for their buck. Well, that's what I'm going to take a look at in this video. I'm going to take a look at 10 PlayStation 4 games that you can get a ton of hours in. We're talking hundreds of hours if need be. So let's just get right into it. And by the way, all of these are of course playable on the PlayStation 5, some of them even featuring upgrades and things of that nature. So let's get right into it. Number 1, Final Fantasy XIV has to be on your list. Final Fantasy XIV has made an incredible comeback from the initial release to A Realm Reborn. It is really one of the most miraculous comebacks I've seen a video game make. That's why when people say something like, yo, Anthem is dead in the water, I'm just like, yo, if Final Fantasy XIV can make a comeback, literally anything can make a comeback. But yeah, Square Enix, not to slight their work, they have done an incredible job with the game over the last few years. Their team that works on FF14 is tremendous. The DLC content, I should say expansion, DLC kind of has a negative connotation to it. The expansion content has been tremendous, and we're getting another one later this year. The thing about Final Fantasy XIV as well, maybe when you look at MMOs, you kind of see it as a little bit of a grind fest, and yeah, sometimes Final Fantasy XIV does require a little bit of grinding. However, I also do have to add, Final Fantasy XIV from a narrative standpoint is one of the best games in the Final Fantasy franchise. That is not a hyperbolic statement. Maybe some of you guys think some of the Final Fantasy stories have been tremendous, and sure they have, but FF14 is right up there with the best of them. Not only a ton of content, great music, great gameplay, visuals are fantastic, and it's coming to the PlayStation 5. It's going to look really, really nice on there. Just a lot of good with Final Fantasy XIV, so that's an easy recommendation and one that obviously you can spend a ton of time into. Next up, Monster Hunter World and Monster Hunter World Iceborne, the expansion. Monster Hunter World is another game that Capcom has done a tremendous job with. When the game came out initially for the $60, it was already a high-quality product. Then Capcom decided, hey, let's keep rolling out free updates to make the game replayable, and you could already sink an incredible amount of time into it. And then they released the expansion, Iceborne. Okay, it was a paid expansion, but it added so much content that this was one of the paid expansions that's absolutely worth it. It was $40, adds a wealth of new content, and made the Monster Hunter World experience that much more expansive. And if we're talking gameplay time, yeah, easy 100 hours, easy 200 hours, 300 hours, so much replayability and content to keep you going for quite a while. And at this point, you can get the Iceborne Master Edition, which includes the base game and Iceborne, relatively cheap. We're talking $20, $25, and the amount of hours that you're getting is crazy. Next up, another MMO, The Elder Scrolls Online Tamriel Unlimited, another one that at launch had a couple of rocky moments and then has made quite the comeback, and Elder Scrolls Online continues to be updated, continues to get its fair share of expansions. I am more partial towards Final Fantasy XIV because, you know, Final Fantasy is kind of my home turf, but I even love the Elder Scrolls setting, so it's one that I got into a little bit, but definitely not as much as Final Fantasy XIV. When you're talking about MMOs, you really can get invested into one at a time. If you're trying to play multiple MMOs, hey, more power to you, but that sounds like something difficult to do. Nevertheless, ESO has been another one of those games that has gotten consistent content updates. And also, it regularly has free-to-play weekends and free weeks and things of that nature, so you can get into the game without spending any money at all, and you can try it out, see if you like it. One thing can lead to another, and with these MMOs, you can end up having, you know, hundreds of hours before you even know it. With these games, we're talking people having, you know, thousands of hours pretty easily, so another one to check out. Next up, another game that I've been playing on and off since its launch, and that is Warframe. I remember checking out Warframe way back when it came out on PC, and yes, another one of those games that I enjoyed the combat and gameplay when it launched. However, this game has gotten tremendous over the years. It was to the point where the reviews got completely outdated for the game, and the game needed to be re-reviewed by a lot of you know, outlets just because it wasn't relevant anymore, and it was like a totally different game. Warframe is one of those games that, yes, it's grindy at times, but I get so into the gameplay of it. Like, I just love the action-oriented gameplay. I think the presentation's great. Gameplay is fast, fluid, smooth. And also, a really rockin' soundtrack with Warframe as well. Warframe has been one of those consistent experiences across all platforms, whether it be on PC, PlayStation. You really can get a good experience out of all of them. I would recommend, if you're getting into the game, try to jump in with a friend or two, and you could probably have an even better experience playing it that way. But nevertheless, Warframe as a free-to-play title, a game you should definitely check out. And again, it being free-to-play, easy sell to your buddies. Speaking of games I would play with a friend, Diablo 3 Eternal Collection is an easy one to recommend, especially because this one has been rocketing down in price as well. You can get the Eternal Collection for like 20 bucks these days, and Diablo 3 is one of those games that is just incredibly replayable. I have friends that go back to Diablo all the time. I played Diablo quite a bit, you know, during my first run with it and playing the expansions and things of that nature, but I have friends that typically go back to Diablo, you know, whenever there's a dead period, no games coming out, they'll just be like, hey, let's jump back into Diablo, and you can play a little bit. Or you could get to the point where you're super invested into it and you're clocking in hour after hour after hour with the game. It's got so much to do, especially with all of the additional content on top of the base game that you're getting with the Eternal Collection. Again, just for like $20 these days, this is an easy recommendation, an easy one to say, hey, if you want a lot of content, Diablo 3 Eternal Collection. Okay, next up, this one might not be one that is content filled like the other games, but Minecraft is a game that you could go back and forth with so many times. I know Minecraft is a game that is a little bit controversial to some people, but if you look at what Minecraft is, this is a game that has so much investment to it and so much to do in the game. I mean, let's not even talk about how many hours people have spent on the game. Not my cup of tea, but you have to acknowledge Minecraft for what it is, and what it is one of those games that you can spend so much time with. It's incredibly addicting, and a game that if you're talking about playtime, you kind of have to include it, just because I know some absolute monstrosities of playtimes that some of my buddies have put in with Minecraft. Next up, another MMORPG, Black Desert Online. Wanted to give this one a recommendation as well. Black Desert, I remember when it initially came out on PC, and it got a lot of attention right off the rip just because of its visuals, and yes, its visuals are incredible, but this one, another MMO that if you get into, you can spend a lot of time into it. I played it for quite a while on PC, and I had fun with it. It does get incredibly grindy at points, so that is something to note, but there's a lot of variety in the content in it as well, so another MMO for you to check out. The MMOs are always a surefire bet that if you want a game with a lot of content packed into it, you're probably going to get exactly that. Black Desert Online, available on the PlayStation Store. Next up, a free-to-play title here, Path of Exile. If you want a free-to-play title that has some of those Diablo elements, Path of Exile is one that I would highly recommend to check out. Now, the great thing about Path of Exile, you know, free-to-play games sometimes get that rap of, hey, it's free-to-play, but how much money do I actually have to sink into the game to get a quality experience? Path of Exile is absolutely not like that at all. If you want to play Path of Exile completely free, you can do that. I have a ton of friends that have played Path of Exile totally free to play. They haven't dropped a single cent into the game, and they've invested a lot of time into it. Yes, ultimately, a lot of people will end up dropping some money here and there, but that's more so from enjoyment of the game and investment towards the game, rather than a lot of the times it being a necessity to play Path of Exile. It really doesn't get like that. And another one that if you want to jump in with a couple friends, free-to-play title, would recommend that. Next up, No Man's Sky has really seen a lot of progression over the last few years and has become a content-filled game. No Man's Sky is one that I picked up at launch and I absolutely hated it back in 2016, and you're talking about me dropping $60 on the game, it being a broken mess, a lot of unfinished elements of the game, a lot of promises not kept with No Man's Sky, but over the years it has developed into a very good game. Is it perfect? No, it still has issues here and there, but there's a lot more to like about No Man's Sky than dislike, and I have to say, if you have a PlayStation VR headset, I would not recommend having 8-hour play sessions with No Man's Sky, but man, No Man's Sky is an absolutely incredible game in virtual reality, and that's one element that took the game to the next level. Wish VR was a little bit easier to set up because I would be on it all the time. But if you do have a VR headset, No Man's Sky is absolutely one of those games that you should give a go to. Probably more often than not, you're going to be playing it without the headset because, you know, after playing 6-7 hours of a game with a VR headset, okay, buddy, maybe chill out a little bit. Can't really be doing that, but No Man's Sky is a game that, if you're looking for a lot of content, another one I'd strongly recommend. Again, title that you should jump in with some friends. Lastly, I do want to give one final mention to Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley has been one of those games that got a lot of buzz, and it was done by a very small team. When I say a small team, how small? Well, it was done by one person. Yes, one person took Stardew Valley off the ground, and it became quite the experience for a lot of people. And the best thing about this is it has gotten consistent updates. It has gotten significant updates to the point where they have added so much content to the game, and it has become one with a ton of longevity. Like, at face value, you look at Stardew Valley, maybe you're looking at something that you don't think you're going to spend a ton of time with, but as a farming sim, life sim, so to speak, it's one that's pretty easy to get into, and at the same time, get absolutely lost and absorbed into it, and you can end up spending quite a few hours on it. So that's gonna conclude this video. Again, I could probably add a ton of other games to this list, whether it be Call of Duty Warzone, whether it be the billion RPGs that are on the platform. Maybe we'll do an updated video. Got a couple of other ideas when looking at games that are incredibly replayable or have a ton of content, but that's gonna wrap up this one. Sound off with all of your thoughts in the comments section down below. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.